What's the story, morning glory? What's the word, hummingbird? Thank you so much for joining me again for another review of the Real Housewives of the OC, season 16, episode 3, Gone Guy. So last week I noticed that in the intro, when they're doing their catchphrases, Noella's family was not behind her. And it kind of, I was like, I wonder why her family, wasn't behind her in the intro part. And then I figured, well, maybe they didn't want their child to be seen on TV. But then I was like, okay, so why isn't her husband there behind her? And well, now we know. So it starts off with Shannon and Noella at the esthetician. Evidently, Shannon had overfilled her face with fillers last year, and her face was looking extra plump and extra swollen. And so she's at the esthetician to get that taken care of. Now, while they're there talking, I guess the esthetician is injecting whatever in Shannon's face. And Noella said that she also gets fillers. And I was like, wow, why would you get fillers? Because aren't you like still in your 30s? But anyway, so she says she gets fillers as well, and she's used to the needles because she had to go through IVF. So she talks about her infertility struggles, and she talks about how they had a surrogate who she herself had miscarried. So then they hired a surrogate, and the surrogate was able to deliver their son. And then they hired another surrogate, and the surrogate got pregnant with twins, but then miscarried the twins. So it was really nice to get a peek into Noella's personal life when she's not talking about dungeons and her sexuality and so on and so forth. So then she drops a huge bomb on Shannon when she tells Shannon that she found out that her and her husband are $6 million in debt, in tax debt to the IRS. And that was like, I was like, oh my God, what? $6 million in tax debt. So she says that, right now, what she's really struggling with is not having that trust anymore in her husband. And so she's sharing something very deep and very personal about what she's going through in her marriage. And then for whatever reason, Shannon loops this back to talking about, well, yeah, that's the reason why I can't trust Shannon and Gina. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Who cares about that nonsense that you started? Who cares about that? I want to hear more about this tax debt. So Shannon steals the show by bringing up her stupid, idiotic issues with MGen. And all I can say about that, once again, is that Shannon, it's your fault. You divulged or you shared information that had nothing to do with you with two people who you don't really know that well. Because let's be real, Shannon and MGen are not really friends. They're friends by default because Vicky and Tamara are no longer on the show. Because everybody knows if Vicky and Tamara were still on the show, Shannon would not have one word to say to Emily or Gina. She would be so focused, and her head would be so... She would be so focused with Tamara and Vicky. Shannon, this whole fake friendship with you and MGen, let's kill it. Let's kill it. You don't have any friends. Your true friends, the people that you really vibe with, are not there anymore, and you're trying to vibe with these younger girls, and it's just not working. So anyway, so she talks about, I've lost all this trust in Emily and Gina, so I understand what you're going through. Okay, you losing trust in two people that you were barely friends with has nothing to do, or can't not be comparable to Noella losing trust in her husband. Okay, so Noella tells her, well, when we arrived at Heather's party, Nicole had really nice things to say about you. And then Shannon goes, well, what did she say at the end of the party? And Noella said, well, let's just say that it's nothing that a lunch date can't fix. And so then Shannon says, you know what, I have a lot of lunch dates to schedule because she has to go do the whole apology tour to everybody so she can, film with someone. So Dr. Jen is home with her kids. She's home with her son because her daughter Cece is in Wyoming, I think, with her mother. And so she FaceTimes her husband, Ryan, and he's in Hawaii somewhere shirtless. Moving on. Gina, she's home with her boyfriend, and she makes plans to meet up with Noella at some point, I think. And then she tells her boyfriend, Gary, that she thinks that Noella was hitting on her at Shannon's no, at Heather's party. And she tells her boyfriend, oh my gosh, she's so amazing. And her boyfriend is like, okay, should I be concerned because you said she was hitting on you and then you're talking about how amazing she is? And then Gina makes a joke, well, she does have a private jet. And then her boyfriend's like, okay, I give my permission, go do what you got to do. So in her confessional, Gina says that she doesn't like being called a girlfriend at this point in her life. And I guess she wants more of a commitment from Gary. And so when she kind of brings up this whole thing about commitment, Gary says, you know what? Yeah, it'll happen eventually, somewhere down the line. So it seems like he's not really in a rush to the altar, but Gina, I guess, she just kind of wants to speed things up. I don't know what's going on there. So then she tells her boyfriend about her issues with Heather and Shannon and Emily and the whole Nicole thing. And when she's talking about it, like her voice is trembling. And I'm like, girl, it ain't that crucial. It's such a non-issue to talk about this. Anyways, moving on. So she talks about that, and then her boyfriend says something about how Heather seems to know you better than Shannon does, and you've known Shannon longer. Moving on, Heather. So she goes to her husband's office, Dr. Terry's office, and she talks about the whole thing with Nicole. Her and Nicole talked about it, and Nicole was really apologetic, and so they've smoothed everything out, so there's no issues there. And then she tells her husband Terry that she told Nicole that Nicole was much as a victim as the DeBrows were, and I'm thinking, a victim to what? Some useless old gossip that Shannon tried to start. You were victims of that? Okay. So Dr. Terry's like, so what was Shannon's goal? And what was her end game? What was her goal? Okay, we all know what the goal was. She obviously just wanted to put some dirt on the DeBrows because she's really jealous. This whole thing with Nicole and the lawsuit. Oh, God, I'm so tired of it. Anyways, but it makes for good TV. Okay, so then she tells her husband that, Shannon had texted her and she wanted to reach out and make plans to meet with Heather so they can talk about the whole issue. And Heather responded with her, this long dissertation, basically saying, not a chance in hell will I ever meet with you. So Gina and Noella, moving on. They're going to cryotherapy. And while they're there, they're talking about this article that was written about Noella's husband. So Gina brings it up, and Gina says that her marriage has a big breakdown in communication. So when I was watching this scene, it made me think to myself that it's funny to me how people get married for very superficial reasons, and then they wonder why their marriages are falling apart. Because I just can't help but feel that now her husband is not, he's not a geriatric old man who was looking for, a trophy wife. He seems like a decent looking guy from what I saw on the billboard. And obviously Noella is a very beautiful woman. And yeah, they could have had a really deep connection, but I kind of feel like she was looking for a man with money and he was looking for a trophy wife. Even though he seems young and decent looking enough, I feel like that their reasons for getting married was a little bit superficial. So anyway, so Noella says that she doesn't understand why her husband just doesn't pay the debt, because they have this house in Puerto Rico that they can sell and it would squash the $6 million tax debt. And she says that she's not in a good space with her husband. Her marriage is on the rocks. So I'm wondering to myself, is she on this show? So why is she on a reality TV show? You would think that exposing all of your issues to the world would not really help in fixing your marriage or whatever's going on there. But maybe she needs the money. I don't know what's going on. So Gina's advice is like, girl, you need to have fun. You need to drink a lot of alcohol, get drunk. And I'm like, yeah, that's great advice, Gina. So once again, Noella finds a way to bring up her dungeon. So they're in there getting cryotherapy and they're talking about her marriage. And I don't understand how she was able to bring up her dungeon. So she talks about her dungeon again. But all that she does in it right now is sleep in it. And I'm like, probably that's what you have been doing, is just probably just sleeping in it. Because, these people who always want to talk about their personal, intimate lives, they probably have nothing really going on there. You know what I mean? Which is makes me wonder kind of, anyways, let's go on. So, and she's talking about this dungeon in front of the cryotherapy lady. So then moving on to Shannon. So Gina calls Shannon, and she wants to make plans to meet with her so they can talk about the whole Heather thing. Now, while she's on the phone with Gina, I swear to God, Shannon had a look of disgust on her face. Shannon is over MJ, and she's probably wondering, why did I even bother with these two women? Because they're out here making me look like an entire clown. Moving on, Emily. So she's home with her family, you know, Sean and the kids, and they're barbecuing outside, and they're talking about him passing the bar. Shane is, I don't think Shane is human. I think Shane is an automaton or a robot or something. I don't understand how anyone can have zero personality, zero emotion, zero facial expression. This man is just like nothing. Absolutely. Even when he was, you know, fighting for his life from COVID, it's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. So she's really excited about him passing the bar. And, you know, she's like, you know, we need to celebrate and do this and do that. And he's just kind of like really nonchalant about it. And I'm like, well, you've been studying for this bar the whole time you've been on this show. And now that you've passed it, for whatever reason, maybe he feels like, well, it's not really, he doesn't really feel the joy in it because they had to lower the standards for COVID. They had to lower the passing score for COVID reasons. Maybe that's why he feels like, whatever. I don't know. But this man is like, no emotion, no nothing. So they're having dinner and the issue of religion comes up. I think their daughter is going to be baptized. And Emily says that, you know, she never grew up in a faith-filled home. She wasn't religious, didn't go to church, none of that. But experiencing what life was like during the pandemic and watching her husband struggle with COVID, she realizes now why people have faith. And she says that she has no problem with Shane raising their children Mormon. She supports that. But I don't think she herself is converted to Mormonism. Moving on, Shannon, Nicole, and Noella, they all three meet up. So Nicole brings up the whole, she brings up Noella and her marital issues. And Nicole mentions that she's going through first of all, it was just Nicole and Noella, I think. Was Shannon there? It was just Nicole and Noella in the beginning. So while they're talking about marriage issues, and Nicole says that she herself is going through a divorce. And then Noella interjects and says, hold up, divorce is not on the table for me. I'm not going through a divorce. And Nicole was like, well, I understand you're not going through a divorce. I'm just letting you know that I'm going through something similar because, you know, she's going through a divorce. So then Shannon arrives. So, Noella says to Shannon, you know, is everything good? Are you good? And Shannon's like, no, not really. And then Shannon, she's already worked up emotionally. Before she even sits down, you can tell that she's, you know, on the edge. So Shannon tries to say that she and Heather were not even talking about, I didn't understand this part. She was trying to imply that when she told Heather this information about the surgery, that it was possible that her and Heather were not even talking about the same Nicole. Because Shannon said that I kept on asking Heather, is it Nicole Weiss? Is it Nicole Weiss? And Heather said no. So she was trying to imply that like whatever she said, whatever she told Heather, or whatever was told to her, or when she was telling Emily and Gina about the whole Nicole surgery and the lawsuit, they weren't even talking about the same Nicole. I think that's what Shannon was implying. I didn't understand that. But anyways, so Nicole says, well, you know what? No one should ever talk about anyone else's medical issues. And that's just a big no-no. And then Noella interjects and says, you know what? This whole thing is it's not even a lawsuit. It's a non-suit. I don't know what she was talking about. Yes, they did end up non-suiting the case or dismissing the case, but I don't know if that's what Noella was implying. Like, she's married to an attorney, so maybe she was referring to the word non-suit in the legal sense, but it didn't sound like she was referring to it in the legal sense. It was like she was trying to say it was a non-issue, but she said non-suit. And the look on Shannon's face was like, oh my God, this woman's an idiot. And this is supposed to be my closest ally on this show this season. So I guess they go ahead and they squash it. Nicole's okay. I think they just went ahead and they were just like, it was over. They talked about it, and Nicole said that she accepted Shannon's apology, and then she pulls out her phone and she starts, primping and pruning herself. So Shannon asked if Nicole is, in her confessional, Shannon was like, is anybody else going to own, what they did? Or is anyone else going to take responsibility for their part? And she says that Gina should take responsibility for telling Heather, and that Nicole should take responsibility for not telling Heather that she was sued by her husband eons ago. Okay, number one, Shannon, Nicole probably didn't tell Heather that she sued her husband because she probably didn't remember that she even filed a lawsuit against Terry Dubrow. Number one. Number two, Nicole has been through so many surgeries, probably has sued so many doctors, and she does everything on the advice of her lawyers. It's not like it's her going down to the courthouse, filing paperwork, and putting down names. It's her lawyers that are doing all of this. So she probably has no idea who was sued, when they were sued, or what the hell was going on. She just didn't like her boobs and wanted someone else to pay for that, and her lawyers were throwing everybody into the lawsuit, from the hospital owners all the way down probably to the receptionist. Everybody was mentioned in the lawsuit. And then when they got deeper into it, they realized, okay, this doctor had nothing to do with it. Let's take them out. This doctor had nothing to do with it. So let's take them out. So eventually everything was dismissed against Dr. Dubrow. So it wasn't like she was like, oh my God, I'm going to, get vengeance against my doctor, Dr. Terry Dubrow. I'm coming after you. And she goes to the courthouse herself and puts down his name and, spends every waking moment, thinking about this lawsuit against Terry Dubrow. Her lawyers were in charge of it. The only thing she was concerned about was fixing her boobs. That's all she cared about. That's all she cared about. And then they realized that Terry Dubrow had nothing to do with it. So they X'd him out of the lawsuit. So Shannon, why in the world would Nicole tell Heather, 25 years ago, I sued your husband for a bad boob job. She probably doesn't even remember that he was mentioned in the lawsuit. And then also, Shannon, let's not forget that the only reason why you even brought up the whole Nicole thing is just you wanted to start this smear campaign against the Dubrows. You don't care about Nicole. You don't care about the lawsuit. It was just a piece of information that you got that you thought, oh, I'm going to use this to make the Dubrows look bad. That's all it was. And it bit you, and it came back and it bit you in the butt. Now, just accept the consequence of being a gossiper, of trying to start a smear campaign against someone, of using old news to bring someone down. Just admit to that. My bad. I'm sorry, y'all. And move on. Okay, Dr. Jen. So she is, so her mother is returning her daughter, Cece. They come in from Wyoming, I guess. We see her husband again, Brian. I don't think this man owns a shirt. And she talks to her mom. Her and her mom go outside to have drinks, and the view was really beautiful outside her home. I don't know, on the terrace, I guess it's called. And so they're having drinks on the terrace, and they're talking about Dr. Jen's father. So her father had passed away the year before. Was it that recent? No, it was years ago. He passed away years ago. So her father ended up being killed in a accident. He was riding his bicycle, and a motorcyclist who was coming down the wrong side of the street ran into him, and he ended up flying off of his bicycle, and he hit his head, had a concussion, and he later died. And he ended up passing away the day before Dr. Jen was supposed to take her exams to get into medical school. And so and I think she's an only child as well. So this was like very hard for her, and her mom are talking about it, and you can tell that, Dr. Jen, she's still really emotional about it. She said she was very, very close to her father, and her father was the one that held the family together. And then when he was gone, everybody just kind of faded away. And she said that, her mom went into a really deep depression during this time. And so when Dr. Jen was hitting all of these milestones of, going through medical school and getting married and starting her career and having children, her mom was sort of like absent because she was dealing with her own depression about her husband passing away. So that was like a really, touching moment. And, she says her mom is from England, and so maybe because of her upbringing, her mom doesn't really share a lot, doesn't get really too personal. And so, but they're working on it. They're working on their relationship. And she sees that her mother is really good with her daughter, and which is good. So yeah, they're working on it. Okay, moving on. So back to Shannon. So Shannon, Noella calls her and says that she was just served with divorce papers. And I'm like, okay, I thought you said divorce was not on the table when you were talking to Nicole. Well, it is on the table. So she gets served with papers, and the papers that she's served with are all in Spanish. So she has her nanny, I think, interpret the documents, and she's served with divorce papers. And I'm kind of like, okay, they have a house in Puerto Rico. So is her husband from Puerto Rico? Like, why is she being served with divorce papers that are written in Spanish? And so Shannon is like, what? So she also tells Shannon that her husband cut off the credit cards. And she's like, you know what? She's got this little boy to take care of, and her husband has turned off all the credit cards. And Noella says that she never thought she would be a single mom, and she just wants her husband back. She's going through a lot. Her son was just diagnosed. Her mom was hospitalized in June, and her husband's filing divorce against her. So Shannon is like, wait, does he actually live in Puerto Rico? Then we went to commercial. When we came back, we were with Gina and Shannon. So they're meeting up. The first thing they do, they talk about Noella and what she's going through and how sad they are for her. Then they call Noella and they decide to invite her over for her to have drinks with them. Okay, so she's on her way. So Shannon and Gina are talking about the whole Heather situation. So Shannon's thing is, I was trying to bond with you and Gina when I was sharing this information. So you want to bond with people by gossiping about someone else. What kind of a person are you, Shannon? So Gina was constantly over talking Shannon, interrupting Shannon. I mean, she's very aggressive, and it's almost like she doesn't want Shannon to say certain things, or she doesn't want certain information. I don't know why when Gina gets mad, she just like bulldozes a person with her words, and she doesn't let anybody speak. And she was constantly like just talking louder, over talking her, not letting her get in a word in edgewise. And it was just like really disturbing. And I'm like, Gina, calm the hell down. It was almost as if she didn't want Shannon to point any fingers at her. And she felt like if I don't let Shannon speak, she can't point any fingers at me, because Gina, you were wrong for going to Heather with that information. And you were doing that just to be messy. So Shannon was like, why did you tell Heather? And then Gina says, well, and then she brings up the whole mistress and the barbecue story, that she was at this barbecue, whatever. We know what that is. She felt really embarrassed because her husband took her to his mistress's house, and everybody knew that the husband was cheating with the mistress at this barbecue but her. And she felt really embarrassed, and she didn't want Heather to go through the same thing. The reasoning is so stupid. So stupid. You told Heather because you wanted to be messy. You wanted Heather to know that this person that you're trying to reconcile with is talking crap about you. This is what she said. That's all. It's got nothing to do with your husband and his barbecue mistress. It's got nothing to do with that. So then Shannon says, well, my husband cheated on me and the same thing happened to me. Everybody knew about his affair but me. So what are you talking about? So they're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So at the end of it all, Gina says, Shannon, and at the end of the day, I really care about you, Shannon. Like, I really, really, really care about you. But Shannon, you can tell from her face that she's like, she turned on the switch, and she's not going to trust Gina and Emily like she did before. And so Gina did also mention, well, Heather told me that you told her that we were not to be trusted. And Shannon was like, well, of course not, because look at what you did. Anyways, moving on. So they kiss and make up and whatever. So then here comes Noella. She arrives and she tells them that she's got no access to the bank account, no access to any money at all, to her savings, nothing, no credit cards. Her husband was in charge of all the finances, and she's left with nothing. So then she talks about the house in Puerto Rico again and how her husband refuses to sell this house in Puerto Rico. And I'm wondering, okay, and then Gina's like, okay, wait a minute. Is your husband Puerto Rican? Is he from Puerto Rico? And Noella says, no, he's from Utah. He's an ex-Mormon from Utah. So I'm wondering, he has a house in Puerto Rico that he refuses to sell. Does he have a family living in that house? Does he have a whole nother wife and children living in that damn house in Puerto Rico, and that's why he's refusing to sell it? What is going on with this damn house in Puerto Rico? And that's where the episode ended. This review was a little bit all over the place, but You know, it always is. So thank you so much for joining me. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will definitely talk to you later. Bye-bye.